Again, welcome everyone. For those who've just joined us, thank you so much for joining us. We are just a few minutes away from 4, and that's when we'll get started. So just sit tight and we'll get started momentarily. Thank you.
Daniel, I'm gonna just test the share screen, okay?
Dr. Marcoux? Dr. Marcoux, I think you're muted. Okay. How about now? Dr. Marcoux?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Dr. Cho?
Here.
We can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
Oh, Dr. Marcoux?
Yes, I can hear George.
Oh, yes, okay. And Dr. Cho?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay,
Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay, sorry about that. Hello, Jennifer.
Hello.
Hello. We'll get
Hi.
started shortly.
Okay.
Yes.
I noticed that there's a number of people that aren't on the video. part, but it might be because they're not able to get in.
Everyone should be able to share their video.
Okay.
Yeah, but some may choose not to.
Okay.
Okay, well, I think we'll get started now. I hope everyone can hear me.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right. Great. So let's get started here. So I just want to welcome everyone to today's Lifestyle Med live event. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing a part of your Sunday today. Our session is titled Surviving the Next Pandemic and What COVID-19 Reveals About Chronic Diseases, Pandemics, and Our Lifestyle. Just a few housekeeping things before we get started here. Just note that this webinar is being recorded. So we encourage everyone to mute your mics, and you can share your video, but just know that it is being recorded. We are also live streaming as well on Facebook. So just please be mindful of that. We will be taking questions, one of the best parts of these kinds of events. So we encourage you to, as you're listening to the discussion and presentation, to enter your questions into the chat box. Or at the very end, we can, there's a raise your hand function, I believe, in Zoom. And if you click on that at the end, we'll unmute you and maybe we'll try having you ask questions verbally as well. But if you prefer, you can put your questions into the chat box and we try to get to as many as possible following the main discussion. And of course, this this event is for educational purposes only. And we encourage you to please speak with your healthcare provider before applying any of the information that is shared during this webinar. I just want to mention that this event is being put on by several partners. First, Pathways Lifestyle Medicine Clinics in Toronto. It's a group of lifestyle medicine and nutrition clinics that focus on lifestyle medicine for chronic diseases. Also, Lifestyle is Medicine. So I'm Dan from Lifestyle is Medicine, and Lifestyle is Medicine is a not-for-profit that puts on lifestyle medicine events in the community. And finally, we are very pleased to host this event with the Peterborough Seventh-day Adventist Church. Adventists, as you may know, are one of the most researched groups and also recognized as the healthiest and longest living people group in North America and around the world. So we're really pleased to be partnering on this event with the Peterborough Seventh-day Adventist Church. And I'm just going to turn it over to Jen. Jen, if you want to just share a few welcoming words.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I'd just like to welcome everyone on behalf of the Peterborough Seventh-day Adventist Church and our Veggie Club. And I think we have a few of our Veggie Club people joining us today. So hi to you. And I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to share with us.
All right. Thank you, Jen. So again, today's session is titled Surviving the Next Pandemic. And as the title suggests, we'll be try to think through together what COVID-19 reveals about the link between infectious disease, chronic disease, and our lifestyle. And something that's not really being talked about as much, and what this means for how we can prepare for future waves of COVID-19 that they're saying are going to be coming, and future pandemics. We're joined by two doctors who are qualified to share with us on this topic. I first want to introduce Dr. William Marcoux. Dr. Marcoux is a family physician who practices in Curtis, Ontario. We're also joined by Dr. George Cho, a naturopathic doctor and certified exercise physiologist who works at Pathways Lifestyle Medicine Clinics and the Cleveland Clinic Canada, both in Toronto. Both doctors focus on preventative and lifestyle medicine. So again, are well qualified to speak on our topic today.
Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, so thank you, Dr. Marcoux and Dr. Cho for joining us. So Dr. Cho, I'm going to give you, I'm going to stop my share. I'm going to give you the screen. You can share your screen now. All right. So, so let's just start off with this question. Right now, there's a lot of discussion about the importance of vaccines and a drug. You know, we even hear on the news, they're saying that without a vaccine and drug, we really can't go back to any semblance of normalcy. So what are your thoughts on this emphasis on vaccines and medications in preparation for a future pandemic? Maybe we start with you, Dr. Cho.
I think that vaccines and medications, particularly vaccines, they do a lot of good. Vaccines have done a tremendous amount of good. But I think right now the SARS-CoV-2 or COVID-19 pandemic is basically exhibit A of why we can't rely on vaccines for emergency situations, right? So already we're several months into this pandemic and a vaccine is still months and months away. We already have over 2 million people who are infected, thousands upon thousands who are already dead, and still no vaccine in sight. And so I think, though, if they eventually develop a vaccine, I think that's obviously going to be a good thing that might help for the future. But as you can see, when an emergency pandemic is already set in motion, then especially when it's a new virus. So the novel coronavirus is a new virus. And so you do not have a vaccine for a new virus, right? You only have vaccines for existing viruses. So in the future, if a new virus comes on the scene, then you can easily see how putting your hopes on a vaccine is quite futile. If you don't mind, I'm going to share here, just kind of maybe educate our viewers on how a vaccine is developed. And I think it'll help us all understand why that we cannot rely solely on vaccines in a state of emergency. All right.
Sure. Yes.
So in order to develop a vaccine, it has to go through several stages of development. And if we see if we see the process, we realize that it does take a long time. So for example, first they have to develop a potential vaccine. Okay, so scientists look at a virus and they examine the virus and they say, okay, what part of the virus can we use as a vaccine? So they come up with an idea of a vaccine. Then they have to test it on animals. So first they test it on animals to see whether the vaccine actually works on the animal. So is it actually vaccinating the animal against this said virus? Then once those series of tests are done, then they have to do another set of tests to test for toxicity. So basically saying, you know, what is the toxic level of the vaccine that's safe? Once they complete of those tests on animals, then they have to start testing on humans. So first they test on healthy humans and they first test, you know, is it safe for humans? Once they satisfy themselves, then they test on two groups. So first they test it on a small group and ask themselves, does it actually work for humans? So we know that it works for animals. Does it work for humans? After they've done that on a small group, then they have to now test it on a larger group of people and say, does it work for a large group of human beings? Once they've satisfied themselves, then they have to actually develop the vaccine, like so mass produce it, then distribute the vaccine. So as you can see, this is a very long process. In fact, if you look here, this is a quotation from a paper released April 14, so very recently, 2020, discussing vaccines for SARS-CoV-2. SARS-CoV-2 is a virus that causes COVID-19, which is the disease. I want our listeners to notice here what they say. And I'm quoting now, because no coronavirus vaccines are on the market and no large-scale manufacturing capacity for these vaccines exists as yet, we will need to build these processes and capacities. Doing this for the first time can be tedious and time consuming, realistically, SARS-CoV-2 vaccines will not be available for another 12 to 18 months. So then, as you can see, these are scientists, right, that are saying this. So 12 to 18 months. So 12 is like a optimistic number, but 18 months is like the more conservative number. So we're looking at still in our situation, probably 6, 8 months, 9 months still in the future for vaccines. So as you can see, again, I want to emphasize that like I'm not against vaccines and stuff like that, but in terms of like we look at a future pandemic, right? Look into the future, and if another new virus comes on the scene, clearly we can see that relying on a vaccine is quite futile.
And how about emergency devices like ventilators? We hear a lot about ventilators, the shortage of ventilators. Any thoughts on that to both of you?
Okay. Can I just make one comment about vaccines?
Sure, yes.
So remember that natural immunity is lifelong, but vaccines wane in effectiveness over time. So that's why you have boosters for tetanus every 10 years, or then the virus can change, like influenza, you require a vaccine every year. And so, there are sort of limitations to the to vaccines in that regard. Likewise, we know that vaccines aren't always 100% effective. I have patients who get the influenza vaccine and yet still come down with influenza. So it's not completely 100% effective. So those are also other areas that need to be brought into consideration.
And then,
Yes.
Daniel, looking back to the H1N1 pandemic of 2009, so if everyone remembers, there was a novel H1N1 virus influenza pandemic that hit in 2009. At that time, there was a vaccine available. The influenza vaccine existed, but a new strain came. So what they had to do, they had to kind of switch it up a little bit. But even then, it still took 6 months for the vaccines to get to the population. And it wasn't even in time to really affect the second wave that came. So even with a vaccine that, even when we're facing a virus for which we already have at least a close vaccine, even then it still took 6 months.
So I would like to dispute the idea that vaccines is the panacea that we need.
Okay, then let's go on to like ventilators. When we think about our topic, surviving the next pandemic, the next wave, a lot of people that talk about ventilators. So what are your, is ventilators really like the thing that we should be focusing on?
Well, then I'm gonna show our viewers here just some stats. So right now what they're doing is they're reporting on the effectiveness of ventilators, and I think our viewers might be surprised as to how effective these things really are.
Okay.
So here you see, I just combined studies from three different reports: China, Northern England, and Seattle. The red part of the graph represents those who have died while put on ventilator to treat COVID-19. Okay, the gray represents those who survived. So as you can see here, in Wuhan, China, in one particular report, 81% of those who were put on ventilators actually died. In England, it was 66%. And in Seattle, it was a little bit better, 47%. So the majority actually survived, but still almost half of people put on ventilators actually died. This is a report from New York City. Okay, so they looked at over 200 patients coming into this particular hospital and for COVID-19, and those who were put in emergency care and put on ventilators. Okay, they didn't finish the study, so they got an early report, but it's very interesting, the numbers. So you see, if you look, for viewers, if you look at the dark red portion, that's those who died on the ventilator. So 36% died on the ventilator. 55% at the end of this report were still on the ventilator. So over half were still on ventilator. If you look at the gray sections, only 4% were discharged after being put on ventilator. 5% were extubated, as in they're taken off ventilator, but they're still in the hospital. So I think the point is this. It's not that ventilators aren't important. As people can see, ventilators save lives. And I think all of us would agree that even one life saved is still very valuable, right? So when the pandemic broke, there was a lot of talk about we don't have enough ventilators, we don't have ventilators and stuff like that. And I think that, yeah, if governments are going to stack up on ventilators, I think that's a very good thing, right? Because clearly it does save lives. But if we're looking at what's the best chance at saving our lives, clearly we can't put all of our hopes on a ventilator either, because as you can see, the percentages are not looking that good, right? If you go back here, look in China, like at least in this particular hospital, over like 80% of people put on ventilators died, right? So again, it saves lives, but relying on these mechanical devices themselves really, I think it's kind of false hope, in my view. I don't know, Dr. Marcoux, if you have maybe opinion to share.
Yeah, so you're looking at stats from the phase 3 of the disease, and we are hoping that we don't get into phase 3, and that the immune system can keep us from getting into phase 3. And we want to focus on phase 2 of the disease and even phase 1 of the disease. And that's really where our hope lies, rather than treating once we get into phase 3 of the disease, which is kind of at the end of the process.
That's why I think Dr. Marcoux makes a really good point, Dan, that these mechanical devices are really good. But again, people want before you get put on a ventilator, you've already advanced so far in the disease that it's hard to really get you back. It's not impossible, as people can see. There's people who do survive after being placed on a ventilator, but like Dr. Marcoux says, already they've advanced so far. And so if we're going to rely on ventilators and just stockpiling ventilators, I think that's a little bit misguided, if I can say that.
So then let's get to the crux of our discussion. So, vaccines are going to take a long time, drugs probably a long time, ventilators, we see some of the data here, important but not everything. So then what, we're here to really talk about what can we do then in the meantime? Are we just kind of helpless? What can we do? What should we focus on?
Yeah, actually, before we get there, Dan, if I could just make a comment on the drugs.
Sure.
So we didn't hit too much on the drugs, and I'm sure Dr. Marco probably knows more about this than I do. But just I think it was last week, Dr. Anthony Fauci. So everyone knows Dr. Fauci. He's the one of President Trump's lead doctors there. He just announced that there was a positive result for a drug called remdesivir, which is antiviral, and they had some pretty good results based on that. But again, already we're months into the pandemic, already 2 point whatever million people infected, thousands upon thousands already dead, and we just had some promising results. So it's not saying like we're going to start using remdesivir, just we kind of had some promising results show up months later, right? And so again, I think same with drugs. I think drugs might move along faster than vaccines. I might be wrong, but again, you can see that if we're going to depend on drugs, it's I think a little bit of a false hope. It's not saying that drugs aren't important, but again, you can see how flawed that reliance is going to be.
So they're looking at medications that are directly antiviral, where you have to understand that how this virus works is it downregulates your immune system. It actually sort of slows the immune system down. So, focusing on the virus is not the whole picture.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, I think.
So yeah, so let's circle back to the question: what should we focus on then to really help us during this time and for what's likely going to come in the future as well?
Yeah, I think I'm going to show some graphs here, and I think our viewers might be very interested to see the association of different chronic diseases with those who have severe forms of COVID-19 or who eventually die. Perhaps some people have heard of the comorbidities. I think that's kind of gotten a little bit more in the news. And I want to show some people the stats. And I think if we look at these statistics, it will give us maybe a clue as to maybe what our best bet is when we're about to face a new pandemic. Okay, so first, let's look at obesity. So here you see lean patients who with COVID-19 and those who eventually advanced so far that they needed a ventilator. Okay, so 58% of lean patients end up not needing a ventilator, even though they did get COVID-19. This is from Lyon. But if you look here, 81% of patients who are obese had to be eventually put on a ventilator. Okay, so, and this is a strong finding. They're finding right now that a lot of the people who are having severe forms of COVID-19 and those who die, actually a large proportion of them are actually overweight or obese. Here you can see this is a study from Italy on COVID-19. As you can see, almost 90%, I want to repeat, almost 90% of those who had severe forms of the disease, who were put on ICU, they are obese or overweight. Okay, and this is a very consistent finding. When people are overweight or obese, their chances of more advanced stages of COVID-19, it goes up quite dramatically. I think it's quite clear here. Here they looked at other comorbidities, okay, and the risk of severe forms of COVID-19. And the percentages you see there is the increased risk. So for example, if someone has diabetes and then they get the SARS-CoV-2 virus, they're 60% more likely to be put on a ventilator or have advanced stages of this disease than those who do not have diabetes. As you can see, hypertension, over 129% increased risk. Being male, unfortunately, seems to increase the risk, and I'm not exactly sure why. But you can see their BMI, so body mass index. So the higher the body mass index, as you can see, the risk of being put on a ventilator from COVID or having advanced stages of COVID-19 goes up. If you can see, severe obesity is over 600% increased risk. Folks, that's really massive, over 600%. So as you can see, having comorbidities, so what that means is co means with and morbidity means disease. So having another disease along with the SARS-CoV-2 virus increases the risk of advanced progression of this disease.
And that also fits into the mortality rates with COVID-19, where if you have cardiovascular disease, your mortality rates over 10%, diabetes 7%, COPD 6%, hypertension 6%, cancer 5.6%, and if you have no comorbidity, your mortality rate, if you acquire it, is 0.9.
That's right. So Dr. Marcoux mentioned cardiovascular disease, and you can see here the risk goes up dramatically, at least according to this meta-analysis released April 23 of this year, so just a few days ago, I guess. You can see that the risk goes up drastically when you have cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and so forth. So then I think the message is clear. When people have other diseases then they get hit with the virus, then really you're compromised.
Yeah, thank you. So basically, if you have a chronic disease, then that really increases your risk for poor outcomes with the COVID-19, and then the chronic disease also, they affect your immune system, right? That's why it weakens you and puts you at greater risk. Is that basically the kind of point you try to make?
Yeah, that's right. So I think people have to realize that when people have chronic diseases, your immune systems are suppressed. We call that immunosuppression. So I want to just maybe have people think of it this way. Your immune system is not like its capacity is not infinite, right? So like it can only handle so much. So if you have like diabetes and your immune system is working to try to deal with the diabetes, but then you get hit with COVID-19, SARS-CoV-2. Now it has to deal with two things. Then you put on top of that obesity, which is like another pro-inflammatory situation. Then again, it has to deal with that. Then you add like hypertension, and now it has to deal with that. And so the more burden you place on the immune system, the more stuff it has to do. It's kind of like being overworked, right? It can only handle so much. And I just want to go to obesity. Um, if you look here, uh, people often don't realize how dangerous obesity really is. Um, your fat cells release pro-inflammatory cytokines. So what that means is you have these things in your body called cytokines. And basically, these are like messengers that signal to the immune system to start to kind of get going. What happens is if people carry excess weight, excess fat, your fat cells promote inflammation, and that drives chronic disease. But also, when it comes to an infection, um, what happens is your immune system is dysregulated because you're carrying excess fat, right? And Dr. Marco, maybe you could correct me if I'm wrong here, but my understanding is that a lot of people who are dying from COVID-19 is actually because your immune system is actually overreacting. Is that not the case? Cytokine storm.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So people have to realize like it's not necessarily because your immune system is like not responding. It's over responding, right? It's called cytokine storm. So your immune system is overreacting, and then because of that, it's creating mucus in your lungs and so forth, which then disturbs oxygen transport and so forth. So then people have difficulty breathing. So what's actually really important is not having your immune system go on hyperdrive. It's actually having a nicely regulated immune system. What happens though is when people carry excess weight, for example, you're pro-inflammatory. So your immune system is in a heightened state of inflammation, overreacting, which then if you put on top of that a virus, then it's the perfect storm.
In addition to that, adipose actually inhibits the vitamin D fabrication by the body because of that. And so remember, vitamin D has been proven to protect against respiratory illnesses. So that's just another reason that fits right in.
That's right. So Dan, I think like if we can really make at least one recommendation is really for people to stay trim. You don't have to be like bone thin, but like just be in a healthy weight. I think more than ever, I think it really this situation here that we're in really demonstrates why being in a healthy weight is really critical.
Mm-hmm. And like all the conditions that you and Dr. Marcoux have been talking about are lifestyle related conditions. So before we go to questions, why don't we just talk about that briefly, or why don't you share with us what are some of the practical lifestyle things that we can do to really strengthen our immune system, lower our risk for these diseases, so that we can, when things like this come around, we can be, reduce our risk for poor outcomes.
Yes, so remember, it's the innate immune system that is affected here, and we can really paralyze the innate immune system simply by eating sugar. They've proven that it actually paralyzes your macrophages, and they do not function normally. And you don't have to have very much to actually start affecting it in a cell culture. So that's the first nutritional recommendation that I would have is sugar will really increase your risk of worsening the infection and also acquiring it to begin with.
Yeah, I think Dr. Marco really makes a good point, and I think people should be aware of like hidden sugars. So like I think a good rule of thumb is when you're buying something and you turn the package around and you see added sugar, right? Generally, probably not the greatest. It's probably better to eat like natural sugars in fruit and things like that, where it comes with other nutrients and minerals and all. It's complex with other different things, not just simple sugars. So Yeah, I agree with Dr. Marcoux here. Juices, chocolate bars and all this kind of stuff with all these added sugar. It's probably not the greatest. We probably eat too much as a society. I think also there's something to be said about whole plant-based nutrition and staying away from meat. I'm going to show you here a study here. This is Dr. Cotto Esselstyn, and we talked about cardiovascular disease and one of the major comorbidities they're finding with COVID-19. And you see here, if you see block A, that is an individual with coronary heart disease or blockage of the or narrowing of the arteries. You can see it's very narrowed. Dr. Cotto Esselstyn of Cleveland Clinic, he puts his patients on a whole plant-based diet. So pretty much that means whole foods, so like unprocessed, and then plant-based, so no animal foods. And then within months to less than a year, already they see opening up of the arteries. So you see in slide B, you see there that same artery has opened up. You can see the dramatic change from narrowing to opening. And this is from a simple change to a standard American diet, which is high in animal products, to a whole foods plant-based diet, which is only plant foods in its whole form. And as you can see, you can literally reverse coronary heart disease, which is a major comorbidity for things like COVID-19.
And you have to understand too that meat, a diet, produces an inflammatory response in the system, because when that energy is used, there's an acid or an inflammatory ash, as it were, where a plant-based diet will produce an alkaline ash, which has a different kind of response. So in addition to the negative effects on your circulation, because perfect health is perfect circulation, it also has an increased inflammatory effect, which then again would heighten the possibility of getting into a cytokine storm for COVID-19.
And Daniel, if I could talk maybe briefly about diabetes. So we mentioned that diabetes is another chronic disease, another major comorbidity for COVID-19. And you can see here, again, it's the same thing. A whole plant-based diet has been shown to be very powerful, has very powerful effects when it comes to preventing and also even potentially reversing type 2 diabetes. So in this study, you see here two groups. One group is just the control group, and the green line represents those who are on a fully plant-based diet. And the numbers you see is hemoglobin A1C. Anything above 6.5 is type 2 diabetes, and then below is pre-diabetes, and then below 6 is normal. As you can see here, the plant-based group, the green line, they start at 7.5% hemoglobin A1C, which is clearly diabetic range. Then in just 12 weeks, that's 3 months, folks, it's at 6.6. It's only 0.6 or 0.2 away from getting out of the diabetes range. And this is from following simple instructions, which is take out all animal foods, eat whole plant-based diet, right? So you can see here almost a near reversal of heart disease. If this study went for maybe 15 weeks, 16 weeks, maybe 20 weeks, I'm pretty sure that number would have reversed completely, right? And this is just one out of many studies that we can show our audience, that shows that whole plant-based nutrition can help prevent and also even potentially reverse things like type 2 diabetes. So if any of our listeners have type 2 diabetes, or a family member who has type 2 diabetes or even heart disease, really, I think the current pandemic is really a good wake-up call for us to really deal with these diseases, because it really protects us, as Dr. Marcoux talked about, for future pandemics that might arise.
Great. And how about any other advice as it relates to maybe other areas of our lifestyle, like exercise maybe, or stress, any of the other areas of lifestyle medicine? Any tips on that? Sleep.
Dr. Mark, were you going to say something or?
Well, I just didn't know if you were going to go into air or which one you were going to go into. So I'll just follow you and then comment it when you're in that area.
Well, Daniel, if I could make a mention on exercise here. They're telling us to stay inside and stuff, but I think if there's ever a good time to exercise, I think it's now. If you look in this graph here, it shows different immune cells. So everyone might recognize like T cells and B cells. You're kind of familiar. Everyone's familiar with T cells and B cells, and you can see NK cells, which is natural killer cells. Natural killer cells they actually go and actually directly kill viruses and stuff like that. So as you can see in this graph here, with exercise, actually the number of these things actually goes up. But then you can see that it actually drops down. And so people might be like, well, that's actually really not good. How come it's dropping down? Don't we want it to stay up? So maybe exercise isn't a good thing. But what they're finding right now is that your immune cells, the numbers actually go up with exercise, but then a few hours after it goes down in the blood. But what's happening is not because they're dying off, it's actually because the immune cells are being redistributed to peripheral tissues. In fact, if you look at the science, it's really fascinating, Daniel. They're saying that these immune cells in the blood, they go up with exercise. Then after exercise, the numbers drop in the blood. And that's because they're no longer staying in the blood. They're actually being transported to other tissues. And it's interesting, they say it's being transported to the lungs and to the gut, which is very fascinating because these are the two areas which is is pretty much like the gateway for infections and stuff to get into our bodies, is the gut and the lungs. And so It's amazing that we're designed that when we are exercising, we boost the number of soldiers in our body, and then those soldiers are getting redeployed to basically the front lines where the real battles are happening, right? And so really, I think if there was a time where we should be really taking exercise seriously, it ought to be now, right? And
if possible, have that exercise in the open air, because we know that the negative ions of the open air actually are used by the body to protect the cell wall, which makes it more difficult for viral entrance. Likewise, the fresh air also has effects on natural killer cells and boosts that innate immunity, which is the one that's specifically affected by this illness.
Now, Daniel, somebody might be saying like, well, I thought you guys just said that like too much immunity, like too much, if the immune system overreacting, that's not good. So if you get all these immune cells, wouldn't that be bad, right? But the thing is that it's not just the killers that are being increased, but it's also what we call like T-reg cells, regulatory T cells. So regulatory T cells, like just like the name implies, they regulate the immune system. So we get more soldiers, but also we get more numbers of regulators. So in fact, it's just the immune system is even more regulated. It's in a better state. You got more soldiers, but they're in a more I guess you can say balanced state, right? So again, like it's just exercise and eating healthy. It does wonders for the body, and really, I think people have to really get on that.
And it's unfortunate that the green spaces are closed right now, because not only is exercise most beneficial outside, but in the context of natural spaces, it's even further potentiated.
That's right. And then you asked about like other lifestyle factors. Like I think everyone recognizes, sleep is really important, right? So if there's a good time to start getting good sleep habits, it's probably now. So I think I would encourage everyone to develop good sleep habits. That's a really good thing. Drinking water as well is also very helpful. Stress also is inflammatory as well. So stress is something to deal with as well.
Dr. Marcoux, did you want to add anything else?
There was an interesting study done out of Harvard that looked at air pollution and risk of mortality with COVID-19, and even small increases in pollution increase that risk. So likewise, again, cleaner air is crucial for going forward and focusing on future pandemics. And so, I mean, I would, if possible, try to move or live in an area that has less air pollution. So city living has its benefits, but air quality is not one of them.
Yeah, Dr. Marcoux out there in the country, so he knows that well. Daniel, I think it's important for our listeners to realize that the vast majority of people who got the SARS-CoV-2 virus actually survived. So right now, I think the media makes it seem like it's all pandemonium and stuff like that. But actually, the vast majority of people are actually surviving. And so, why is that the case? There's no drug. There's no vaccine. The ventilators do work, but not in the majority of cases. At least it seems like that. So why are the vast majority of people surviving? It's very simple, because you got something that's more powerful than a drug, vaccine, or ventilators, which is your immune system. As Dr. Marcoux mentioned, the innate immune system and so forth. And so basically, this is our best chance at protecting us from future situations, future pandemic. Is really our immune system. And somebody might say, like, well, this is a new virus, so can an immune system deal with a new virus? Well, yes, it can. The vast majority of people face this virus, or the vast majority of people who face this new virus survive, because the immune system can deal with even new viruses, right? So again, I think the most potent thing we have in our human body is our immune system, and that cannot be overstated.
It's interesting too that in some hospitals they're actually putting nature scenes in patients' room, which have been shown to actually decrease adrenaline and things like that, and help the immune system. So again, surrounding yourself with natural spaces, or even pictures of natural spaces, even a plant in your room, have potential benefits. So, they've also showed that out of Japan studies that your innate immune system is increased by what they called a forest bath, and that's basically just aerosol oils from the trees that you breathe in. And so if you do live in the city and you don't have green spaces, just even some essential oils, like for example cedar or pine, in the air would also be a benefit.
Wonderful. I think this is such an important discussion, because when we look at the discussion in the media and even among the officials, they don't talk about nutrition and the immune system that much. Everything's so focused on all these other things that we talked about at the beginning, and no one's really talking about the immune system and nutrition. But we in lifestyle medicine, we know that these are the most important things. So I think this is why this discussion is so important, and it's rather unfortunate.
They did some studies following exposure on Google of various lifestyle factors or immune sort of boosting factors, and the ones that were mostly seen had either a financial bias or a media bias to them. And unfortunately, the lifestyle ones that are the most powerful in my mind were the least, or the more neutral of anything. So the mainstream media is not focusing on this. It was clear that they're mostly focusing on vaccines, where I think that the lifestyle factors are extremely potent, not just for our future one, but for us right now.
Daniel, before we get to questions, may I say that Dr. Marcoux and I, we're not against vaccines or drugs. I'm a naturopath doctor, but I'm not against drugs. I think these are the important places. But when we leave lifestyle out of the conversation, I think it's really not good. Now, another thing is, some people might say, like, but they haven't tested, they haven't done like a scientific study on plant-based nutrition in COVID-19, or like exercise in COVID-19. So there's not evidence-based.
Right.
I think that's a little bit misguided, because, for example, if you look at lots of things that they told us to do, right, it's also not evidence-based, right? So for example, they said the 6 feet rule, right? Social distancing. Did they do a randomized controlled, placebo-controlled trial on that? No, they had no time to do that. They had to meet an emergency, right? So they just based on prior experience, they know, okay, let's just stay away, let's wear masks. But did anyone do a study on masks for COVID-19? No, there's no study on masks. but they know it makes sense to tell people to wear masks and stuff like that, right? Even like ventilators and stuff like that. Like, so to expect to have a randomized controls trial on every single thing before you actually implement it is really quite foolish. I think we have to look at what has worked in the past. What does the evidence say helps us with our immune system, and try to apply those. And I think the evidence right now, at least this pandemic, has really revealed the need to keep our bodies healthy.
There's a tremendous amount of research that proves that the simple lifestyle things that we've talked about does decrease inflammatory responses in the body. So that thing alone should encourage us that this is something that we need to endeavor to be involved in. Also, we have tremendous historical evidence that things like diet and rest can significantly change the events in a pandemic. And I'm speaking specifically of the Spanish influenza of 1919. So we have tremendous information that can back up what we are talking about here.
Wonderful. Great. Yeah, I think sometimes we lose our common sense because we're so tied to some of these scientific things, which is of course important, but all right. So we do want to get to your questions. So if you have questions, we encourage you to put them into the chat box. I already see some coming in here. If you want to maybe try asking your question verbally, there's a reaction button, I believe, at the bottom of your Zoom. You click on that, and I think there's a hand. So kind of like raise your hand virtually, and then I'll try to unmute you and see how it goes. But let's start with some of the questions that have come in through the chat box. Maybe Dr. Marcoux, I'll direct this to you. You had talked about sugar. So we have a question here. How about honey instead of, like table sugar? Is that?
Well, yeah. So honey is concentrated, and so it should be used in moderation. It's certainly more natural than a refined sugar, but still it is concentrated, and so I would use it very temperately because it does have similar effects.
Okay, great, and thank you for that great question. We have another one here. Hi, I have Hashimoto's hypothyroid or any other autoimmune conditions. Is my immune system overreacting if it gets COVID?
So thank you for the question, whoever gave the question. I've been trying to read up on the science that's coming out about COVID-19. So the question was specific about COVID-19. And I don't know if Dr. Marcoux has seen anything, but I haven't really seen anything significantly linking Hashimoto's or any other thyroid condition with SARS-CoV-2. I might be mistaken, but we've seen diabetes, heart disease, obesity, and things like that. But I haven't read anything on Hashimoto's. So I don't know. I can't really comment on its link with COVID-19.
It certainly it's the comorbidities of lifestyle that seem to be the ones implicated. Obviously, they're more common. Hashimoto's isn't as common. So I don't think the numbers are out there to actually give us evidence to say that it increases one's risk of having a poorer result.
Okay.
Maybe maybe in the future, because I'm sure they're going to keep on studying COVID-19. Maybe in the future they might show something, but currently right now, I haven't seen anything. So.
Okay. We have another great question from Sam So. I'm just going to read the names that you put in there in the Zoom. Any special advice for healthcare providers, frontline workers who are exposed to a lot of COVID, maybe from a lifestyle perspective?
So I would begin your day with hot and cold showers. Because that's going to be helping the circulation. A simple 3-minute hot, 10-second cold for like 3 cycles. I have a bit of a steam shower, and I use that as well. At beginning of the day and at the end of the day. I am maxing out on my zinc-based foods. So that's your seeds and nuts, your antioxidant high foods like berries, and likewise, every chance I get out, I go stand out in the sun, because remember, this virus denatures very, very quickly in sunlight. In fact, I think the half-life in full sunlight is 2 minutes for this virus. So
Wow.
that's very encouraging. So on breaks, I wouldn't be inside having a cup of coffee. I'd be outside if it's sunny, that kind of thing. Certainly, the very things that we've talked about, walking, decreasing your stress levels by trying to get to a green space, those kinds of things. Absolutely.
Yeah, eating plant-based foods, things like that. So I just want to thank, if it's a nurse who's asking the question, just want to thank them for their service if they're at the front lines right now.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you for that. But yeah, like we talked about it, eating more plant-based and less processed foods, and the stuff that Dr. Marcoux mentioned. So just from a lifestyle perspective, if there ever was a time that we need to really optimize our lifestyle habits, I think it is now. And if we're directly in a situation where COVID is more, exposure to COVID is greater, then wow, does that become even more important?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
At least as best as possible. I'm pretty sure they're really overworked right now, but at least just within the best we can, right? So.
Mm-hmm. Right. It's challenging. We have another very provocative question from Angie Dechev. Thoughts on medical freedom and forced vaccinations for COVID-19? I think there's some underlying kind of concerns, maybe because of the big impact of this COVID-19. People, they might maybe move towards, try to vaccinate everyone, and whenever a vaccine becomes available, to avoid something like this. What are your thoughts? It's a bit provocative, but throwing it out there.
I'll let Dr. Marcoux answer. I have no particular.
I guess it's the balance between societal concerns and the individual. And how do you find that balance between rights of conscience and the needs of society? Every culture will make a different decision on that. In the West, historically, and we've always catered more to the side of the individual. In other societies, they've catered more towards the group is paramount. And so, every society will have to make that decision. Fortunately, right now, in our society, it does rest with the individual. Whether that will change is going to have to be a political discussion. And if there's any concerns, then you need to get involved in that political discussion.
I guess that's
everybody would have to make their own decision. I think that would be the best thing to do.
I guess that's one of the wonderful aspects of our society, our systems, that we have a voice that we can share and get involved in the political process, like you're saying, Dr. Marcoux. Yeah. All right. Thank you for that. Are there any specific foods that can help prevent from getting the coronavirus or any virus in general? Any specific foods?
Well, Dr. Marcoux, correct me if I'm wrong, but like foods can't prevent you getting the virus. Like, the virus has to come into your system. There's no food that can really prevent that from happening. So, I think the focus can't. Well, I guess the focus we want to prevent things from getting inside our bodies. That's from hygiene. But I think the real question is, once it gets in, then what happens, right? And clearly, there's many people who they've gotten it, but they recovered. But then there's the few who, unfortunately, they were not able to deal with it. So I think maybe I have to rephrase the question to say, once we get it, what specific foods can help with it? Because no food can really prevent us getting a virus, per se. Yeah.
What foods do is will inhibit that virus replicating and causing problems.
Yeah.
But obviously, prior to it coming into the body, that's where hand washing and social distancing and all those other things come into play.
Right, right. Great. And just a follow up with the initial Hashimoto question. Autoimmune disease is a general state of a more active immune system. So isn't there a link between that and what you're talking about? I think the elevated immune response in COVID.
So in my experience, people with autoimmune conditions can be benefited from lifestyle medicine, whether it's rheumatoid arthritis or Hashimoto's or other kinds, that they can significantly have improvement with a change in their diet, increased exercise, all those things. So I suspect that the benefits of lifestyle medicine will be the same regardless of what kind of condition you have, whether it's Hashimoto's or diabetes, or if you have no condition at all. It's going to help everybody. But as for whether it's going to increase your risk of having a worse result, I don't really know. I'm going to be honest.
Thank you, Dr. Marcoux. Dr. Cho, any thoughts on that one?
I think Dr. Marcoux said it. No,
Okay.
nothing else to add there.
All right, wonderful. I don't see any other questions coming in. So I want to thank everyone so much for joining us today. Maybe before we close, Dr. Marcoux and Dr. Cho, any final thoughts or comments you want to share about this really important discussion?
Go ahead.
Well, I just want to encourage everyone to just realize first that your best weapon, your best defense is not outside of you, it's inside of you. It's your immune system, right? And basically the way you help have an optimal immune system is with our lifestyle. Our poor lifestyle habits suppress and dysregulate the immune system, whereas optimal lifestyle habits help us with our immune system. So I think if this pandemic ever exposed the futility of certain things that we might have relied on, I think it has done that. And I think if it has revealed the importance of living healthy lives, I think it has also done that as well. Again, we're not against drugs and vaccines. These have made very positive contributions to human health. But when we're faced with a new virus, really, the conventional medicine is almost incapacitated. And even naturopathic medicine, no supplement or nothing replaces actually having a healthy lifestyle, right? So I think that's what we want to emphasize today. If there's ever time to eat healthy, plant-based, getting exercise and things like that, I think really now is the time.
And we never really went into it in our discussion, but mental health also has a huge important role to have on your immune system and your immune responses. And so I would just want to end with the thought that keep your relationships alive and keep your positive thoughts going and reject the negative thoughts and be hopeful as we face these uncertain days, because that's going to help your immune system too, and it's going to help others around you as you have a positive influence on them. And don't forget to consider spiritual realities, because there's lots of science out there that's also proving that a faith in God can actually positively affect your immune response and also your survival if you were to have anything from trauma or infections or more serious health problems. So that whole area can also be very, very beneficial.
All right. Thank you so much. It is 5 o'clock, so we bring this to a close. Thank you, Dr. Marcoux and Dr. Cho, for sharing with us. Want to give a big shout out to the Peterborough Seventh-day Adventist Church and their Veggie Club. Thank you, Jennifer, and everyone on the line who's from that club for joining and sponsoring this event. Thank you to everyone who's joined us. I want to invite you to our next one. It's next week, Sunday. We have a very distinguished guest. Is Dr. Gary Fraser from Loma Linda University. and he'll be sharing with us decades of research among Seventh-day Adventists, and who are, again, recognized as the longest living and healthiest people group in the world. They've been doing NIH-funded studies comparing different Adventists and their lifestyles, and very fascinating results on the importance of different lifestyle patterns. So we're really excited for that. I hope that you can join us again next week, 4 p.m. same time on Sunday. You can register for free at lifestylemed.org/online. So we hope you can join us for that. So again, thank you so much for joining us. We hope that you found this information valuable, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.